And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
Today's guest is Laura Roehrick. She is a retired registered nurse who previously had severe pneumonia that ended up causing her to have a near-death experience. And today we're going to find out about it. Laura, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. This is actually wonderful because I love to talk about this. Now that I know that I feel it actually was more of a near-death experience, I'll start out, I'll tell you what happened. This happened about 30 years ago, but the memory is still pretty fresh in my mind. I was in my late 30s, I think, something like that. I'm 68 now. I was in my late 30s. I had two small children. I got the flu. And that year, it was a really bad flu, and it was going into pneumonia. And I got severe pneumonia. And the thing about pneumonia, folks, is that if you have pneumonia, you have no idea how sick you are because you're not getting enough oxygen to the brain. So long story short, I ended up in the hospital for 8 days with trilobar pneumonia, which means that 3 of the 5 lobes of my lungs were pretty filled or consolidated with pneumonia, and I could not breathe well at all. It was awful. And I was having fevers and coughing up blood and all that stuff. So they took me by ambulance to the hospital, told my husband that they didn't know if I was going to make it. I didn't know they told him that. I did not know how sick I was because I had pneumonia, I guess. It's like that Jim, the Muppets guy who died of pneumonia. Same kind of thing happened. You just don't know how sick you are. So anyway, I'm in the hospital. And I think this experience happened on the first night, within the first 2 days anyway. And what I felt like, I had this experience. It was kind of like a dream. And for these last 38 years, whatever it's been, I called it a near-death experience, but it wasn't until I saw the entire, I think, an hour and a half video of Dr. Eben Alexander talking about his near-death experience, and that I realized mine was similar. In fact, I look at his experience as kind of a 12-chapter book. I mean, he had the biggest NDE I've ever heard about. But in one of his stages, he described being surrounded by all these beings. And when he said that, okay, so I'll tell you about my experience and then we can compare them. So what happened with me is that all of a sudden, instantaneously, I found myself in a room that wasn't a room. I was myself, but I wasn't myself. I was actually just consciousness. I did not have a body, so I didn't have one of those out of body looking down at my body experiences. What I had was that I just went from being in a hospital bed to being sort of nothing in this area, kind of a room without walls, but there was part of this area that kept sort of opening, and I was surrounded by thousands, if not millions, of what I called them my ethereal healing buddies. And to me, I couldn't see them. They were small little entities all around me, but they were thrumming or humming. There was a vibration coming from them. And I got the sense that if I was to see one, it would be like Cinderella's fairy godmother. I felt like I was surrounded by a billion little fairy godmothers, and in this area that would open and more would come in. I was just surrounded by them. And it was also a feeling of immense love, like you hear in all these other ones. And it was just very positive. But the funniest thing, or the funnest thing about that, was that these beings all seemed to know each other, and they were all visiting with each other while they were healing me. So it was like, oh, I haven't seen you since the last healing. How have you been? Kind of a thing. But what amazed me when I listened to Dr. Eben Alexander's version, it was like his was a 12-chapter book And in one of the chapters, he had a very distinct thing where he said he went down this hall or something, and he felt like he was surrounded by little monks, which I think is very cute. Mine were fairy godmothers, his were monks, but he said there was thousands of them. And I think his had little candles, but there was a thrum and a vibration. And so just having mine be really very similar to his in his description of that portion of his trip kind of blew my mind. But what made it even more impactful was, I think it was after that I read that the proteins that are in our body that are expelled to heal you when you are sick are stimulated. The proteins are stimulated by vibrations. They were vibrating like crazy. So what I feel like I was somehow in this little chamber with all this energy, it must have just been energy vibrating. And that created, I mean, I'm just looking at it from the nurse scientist point of view, that the vibrations then made my body elicit the proteins that healed me, because that I was okay after that. I broke that. But that's basically what happened. And then I was in the hospital, for 7 more days after that, getting better. And what's sad is because I didn't really think of it as a near-death experience. I mean, it didn't cause me to change my life, or I didn't, find Jesus or any of those things after that. I just always kind of jokingly said, oh, yeah, I had a near-death experience. But back then, I really thought it was more just a dream or a hallucination or seeing the blood cells behind my eyes. And then when I heard Eben Alexander's, it blew me away. I think that was 2 years ago. And then I did my own little YouTube 2-part version of explaining about this, but it was a fat, okay, bye. Sorry, okay, folks. My husband's leaving. That's all right. The way of the world. Okay. So it was short, but it was sweet.
How did you come back? I mean, did you just fall asleep or go unconscious and then wake up later, or do you remember coming back?
I don't remember, because it was so long ago, really where it fit into all that. But that's why I never really thought that it was a near death, because I didn't have that. I didn't snap out of my body. I actually did have an out of body experience when I was a teenager. The first time I ever smoked pot, I did have an out of body experience. So I know how that feels. I was up in the air looking on the top of my head, and it scared me to death. And on Mount Tam in Mill Valley back in 1968. So I didn't have that kind of experience. I couldn't see anything else, but it was extremely extraordinary, and it stuck with me. And I've been telling everybody about it for years. And now I really feel that it was as near to death as I've ever been. And when I heard Eben Alexander's similar story.
In the beginning, you had already a waking consciousness. You were sitting there in the hospital room, and the consciousness just transformed from there to an empty room. There was no blacking out first and coming back, or no transition. It's just you were sitting there, and then all of a sudden everything disappeared, and then you were just, hey, I'm in a different room. What's going on?
I don't even know if it was that. I think I was probably asleep maybe when it happened. I mean, that's why I felt it was more dreamlike. I really can't say for sure exactly what it was, but I didn't snap out or pop back in or any of that stuff. But I was definitely out of my body and not in any kind of a body. I was just like a free-forming energy in another area, definitely not the hospital. It was more like just white emptiness, space. But the feeling of love and happiness and especially the humor, they were just so sweet, these little beings, and so comical, kind of, which I think angels are. I do really love the idea of angels, and I've always talked about guardian angels, and I even have an angel card. Oh, I have an angel card. I made this when I was 10.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I actually just made this. I got a new sewing machine.
Oh, good job.
So what I've been doing is making angel dolls for people. Yeah, it had some stems, some Egyptian. I'm just, bringing all my stuff together.
Mhm.
But so I do, it's like I'm a split personality. There is half of me that's completely woo-woo, that believes all this stuff, especially when it happens to me. I don't always believe everybody else, but I believe what experiences I've had, and I've had a lot of kind of clairvoyant precognition, that sort of stuff. But there's another part of me that's extremely skeptical, and I just kind of go back and forth between those. But
well,
as far as angels and
no, it sounds sensible to me. I mean, I think most people are probably skeptical in the beginning, at least, and
yeah,
that's is what it is. When you were in the experience, were you thinking anything like, is this a dream? Am I alive? Where am I? Did you have the realization that you were or were not dreaming, and you were or were not out of your body?
I knew that something was different, but I don't have any distinct memories like that. It just, and I don't know how long. It could have been a fraction of a second. It could have been an hour. I have no idea, because I was so sick at that time. I could barely breathe, had the high fever, so hard to recall.
But it is an experience where it doesn't fade. And I think you said in the beginning, I mean, it's...
No.
It's clear, or it's still with you 30 years later.
What I'd really love to see if they did some kind of are they studying? Well, they must be studying. Somebody must be studying NDEs.
I think independent people do research on them, like Dr. Van Lommel and other people. I don't know if there's like, the university. Well, I think actually I think a University of Virginia or something is doing something, but I don't think generally on an academic level there's a lot of people,
Yeah, because I think me putting together my experience with Eben Alexander's and the thrumming and the vibration is the first R2 that I've heard of in any of these NDEs. And I think the connection between that and the proteins being stimulated by vibration has just got to be interesting. And it makes me wonder too about how distant healing, because if somebody is trying to heal you distantly, then their energy, I don't know, I would have to almost travel through the energy systems and then promote some sort of vibration. And it just seems all very plausible. I don't know how it all fits together, but I think it makes it more scientific for me to have that vibration in there.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not for me to say whether anybody had an NDE or not, it's not for me. I don't make that judgment call. And I can put my spin on what I think would happen, but and even my analysis of it still may be meaningless.
Yeah. And then I always go back to those things that those of us who are interested in spiritual ways or studying, researching all this stuff, is that we don't even have the capacity to know how to know. It's a different reality.
Yeah. I don't think you have to be clinically dead to have an NDE. You can be near death. And since you were having since you were having breathing problems, that to me, difficulty breathing to me tells me that, you could have definitely had an NDE because, you're close to death if you can't breathe. And I see kind of commonalities. The commonalities I've kind of come up with so far is a lot of people either pop out of their body and they're in this dark space for a while and then they come back, or they go further up through the tunnel into a place of light. And you kind of seem to do, you kind of seem to do neither, but that still doesn't mean you didn't have an NDE. You may have just you were near death. You kind of popped out and saw stuff and saw what was going on and saw your body get in healing.
Or felt it. It was more of a feeling. I really didn't see, because it was just like I was just consciousness, but I was surrounded I was just immersed with all this love and little beings and vibration. And that's exactly, in fact, in YouTube, at exactly 1 hour into Eben Alexander's 1.5 hour near-death experience, that's when he talks about seeing the monks. And honestly, I could not believe it when I heard that. That was what did it for me.
Well, you said you didn't.
And then I got more interested, and I've been studying them a little bit more since. And
I thought you said that you saw little beings, but at least you're perceiving them because you don't have eyes if you're out of your body.
I actually did see flutters, but they were so small that I couldn't really see with my eye what they looked like. But the feeling that I got it was almost like no-see-ums at the beach, when you're surrounded by millions of them. No-see-ums are the little mosquitoes in Mexico.
Okay, maybe we call them gnats down here.
Mosquitoes in Mexico?
Okay, maybe we call them gnats down here in Texas.
Okay, or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was something that I knew was there, so I could sort of, because I do remember a visual experience of feeling and seeing these entities, my healing buddies. But they were so small, I really couldn't make them out. But my mind said, oh, they're little fairy godmothers, just to give them something I could relate to.
But you didn't.
But they seem to be smaller than the ones in Dr. Alexander's. He could see them as clearly as monks. But you did say, or at least I thought you said, that you perceived them communicating with each other. Yes. Yeah. Yes. They all seemed to know each other. They all seemed to be delighted to be visiting with each other while telling me. And they were almost like they were telling little jokes or, hi, haven't seen you. And, just a really unforgettable feeling of just being cared for. So it was extraordinary. Yeah. I kind of want to think little pixies flying around, but I think that's too big. Yeah. Or Bell, or but yeah. And when he said the monks, that just was his version. I think my theory. I don't know what I really think, but I think people's NDEs were what they see, like the people who see Jesus. They're maybe people who, they know Jesus and they've been raised and they see him. I was listening to one of the podcasts recently about that. And I was not allowed to even go to church. My mother was an atheist and she didn't want me to go to church. I went with a neighbor once and they pulled me home and said, no more. So I've just created my own spiritual ideas and things that I follow. But I think that people are possibly, their experiences are from what they were raised with culturally or whatever. I would agree with that. And then I would also say, I've had guests on the show that were either atheist or non-religious that still saw Jesus. Now, I'm open to it. See, before I was never an atheist. I've always been open, and I've had so many extraordinary experiences in my life, just more kind of precognitive. I go through stages sometimes of some clairvoyance, but nothing that I can handle or manage or count on. But for instance, one of what I was saying about Jesus is I'd love to see Jesus. I would love to be a Christian or to know that the way that those people know it. It's never happened to me. I've never seen Jesus. I'm sort of very ambivalent about organized religion in general. I just have my own spiritual beliefs. But if I saw Jesus, I'd be very happy. Yeah, I get that. And he can still come visit. Every person has their own experience of an NDE. I haven't had one be exactly the same. Yeah. And maybe we see it through our own filters and our own belief systems. I'm not sure. All right, let's get back to this. So it's still there with you for the last 30 years or so. It doesn't fade. You said it didn't really change you. You don't feel like you had any kind of spiritual change. Well, actually, I was just going to say, I think I take that possibly it could have awakened some latent spiritual skills or something, because I kind of rotate through these stages of having more spiritual things happen to me than not. And I kind of put that in with astrology transits. I think I'm really affected by the planets in general. But for 3 months at the beginning of the pandemic, I was having clairvoyant visions almost every night when I went to bed, and then they just stopped. But when I had them, they were pretty phenomenal. So from what I've heard about NDEs from other people, is sometimes it can spark, some new skills with you, and that may have happened from that. Mm-hmm. I did have some stuff happen before that, so I was experiencing especially precognition. I just have I've had a lot of dreams that have happened, and just having ideas and then finding out that happened when I was thinking about it. So I've had a lot of that kind of stuff, but I do think it is possible that it increased it.
Yeah, I think so. You haven't noticed like any clairvoyance or clairaudience or...
It's more the precognition.
I was going to say, you haven't been out of your body since then.
No. Nothing that dramatic. No.
Okay.
What I've had is the precognition and the clairvoyance, I think. But I can't control it, and I know I could try to work with it. I'm not quite ready to do that. I don't know if I'm scared or just want to let it evolve on its own and just kind of let it be.
Have you considered hypnotherapy?
See what happens.
Have you considered hypnotherapy to go back through the incident and see if you pick up anything else?
No, that's really a good idea. I've considered hypnotherapy for past life regressions, but to go back through that could be interesting.
You never know. Maybe there's other stuff that you're blocking out. No, who knows? All right. So what is your YouTube channel if people want to check out what you're up to on YouTube?
Oh, well, I have a YouTube channel, but at the moment it's kind of stagnant. So I'm not trying to promote anything. But what I did was, I am a foot care nurse, and I teach foot care to help prevent amputations from diabetes, toenail care especially. And I started the YouTube channel so I could teach a nurse in Nepal how to use the equipment that I got to her. I sent it through some Nepalese friends. She had a whole kit. So I thought, well, I'll just go down and do homeless foot care at the soup kitchen line. And I set up a tent outside the soup kitchen. And as people were in line we'd go, hey, get your toenails cut, And so it went, I got up to 15,000 subscribers.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I was but it got too big, and I was a nonprofit, and I didn't know about Patreon. I think 1 month I made $1,000, but I just I didn't have the business sense or what it takes to run a YouTube channel and try to make money off it. And that wasn't my goal anyway.
Right.
However, what the work I was doing was important. It still needs to be done. And I think we might get it back up and going. I just need more. I have 5 grandchildren now. So all of that was happening during the YouTube channel, and I can't keep up with it, and the family's first. But I'm getting 2 friends. They're going to help me. And I think we might start it up again because it was really worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're providing a valuable service to people. I mean, even just something simple as how do you take care of an ingrown toenail?
Yeah.
Or prevention, or prevention of foot problems. Your story is not,
No, it's a very small one.
But I still appreciate you coming on. And do you have any last message that you want to share with people, NDE related?
I don't know if it's NDE related, but I will promote somebody else. I won't promote myself, but I mean, you can look for me if I ever get my YouTube back up. But I do think, especially for your sanity, that Wim Hof, do you know who Wim Hof is? The Iceman who does all the cold water bathing in the time of COVID. And this has to do with immune function. I would suggest anybody watching this, go look up Wim Hof and just see what he's about, because it sort of indirectly applies. He does a breathing technique, cold water exposures, and mindfulness meditation, all with the goal of improving your immune system. So they're actually studying him. Somebody got a Nobel Peace Prize based on the work they did with him. He's the first person to show scientifically that we can control our autonomic nervous system, which everybody has said we haven't been able to. And it actually gets into the pineal gland. His breathing exercises stimulate the cerebral spinal fluid to activate the pineal gland. So it's sort of related in a way to all of this, taking care of our bodies and our brains. And
yeah, I think that's interesting. Oh, that's great.
Suggest people check it out.
That's great. All right, Laura. Well,
one other person.
Sure.
Oh, I do have one more. Sorry.
Sure.
Really important. And you may know about her. Saint Hildegard.
I don't know her.
Saint Hildegard de Bingen. She's from Germany, and she is the first. This is really extra. She totally fits into this. Saint Hildegard was the first woman composer. She wrote hymns. I think Orinoco Flow, I think she wrote that, actually. But Saint Hildegard, she was the first naturopath. She was also a visionary and spent half her life hallucinating. I think she was eating a lot of the herbs back there. But they have whole retreats in Germany about her, Saint Hildegard, for medicine, singing, composing. She was one of the most prominent people in the Catholic Church. She was abbess. She ran an abbey.
Interesting.
You've never heard of her?
What was her time period that she was alive?
She was born in 1079, died 1100. She was 80 something. But she was a complete prophet. She was a seer, a composer, an artist, a doctor, a writer, a cook, a gardener. She was amazing. She was really a Renaissance, kind of like the Michelangelo of and I do feel, I honestly do feel I was reincarnated and that I kind of knew her. I don't think I was her. I think I could have been one of the chore boys on her abbey, but I feel very close to her, and that she was an important part of my spiritual awakening sort of thing at the beginning of this pandemic when I was having those visions and everything. It was kind of a freaky time a year ago, right around now.
Maybe I'll get
anyway. That's my Wim Hof and Saint Hildegard. Those are my
two. Yeah, thank you for sharing those with me.
You're welcome.
Laura, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate you giving me your time. I wish you massive success in whatever you're doing. Have a great evening.
Thank you. And to you, and I hope to talk to you. Namaste.
Yes. Namaste, and good night.
And Jumbo. Bye.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.